They rode into history as the daring and deadly Australian Light Horse. These men were the original mounted commandos, elite soldiers on horseback who fought for Australia in the early 20th century. But who were they really? And why should you care about their story? They were farmers, shearers and drovers, ordinary guys who left their rural lives to take on some of the toughest battles of their time. They were part of a mounted infantry unit, which means they fought on both foot and horseback. And let me tell you, they were experts at it. The Australian Light Horse is most famous for its role in World War I, where its members charged into battle at places like Gallipoli and the Western Front. But their story began long before that. The 1st Australian Light Horse Regiment was formed in 1901, just as Australia was becoming a federation. At the time, the country's military was a bit of a patchwork quilt, with each state having its own defence force. The Australian military was created in 1803, but it wasn't until Federation that the 1st Australian Light Horse Regiment was formed. Originally, the plan was to have a mounted infantry force consisting of 6 regiments, 2 from each of the new states of Australia. However, only Queensland and New South Wales had established units by the outbreak of war in 1914. These 2 regiments, along with a handful of other mounted troops from other states, formed the Australian 1st Light Horse Brigade. When war broke out, the Australian public was eager to join the fight. In fact, thousands of men enlisted, more than were needed. So a selection process had to be put in place to choose who would go and who would stay behind. Now, you might think that being a farmer or a shearer would make you a bit rusty when it comes to fighting, but you'd be wrong. In fact, those skills were a real asset. You see, the Australian Light Horse were masters of horsemanship, marksmanship, and survival in the bush. They were also pretty handy with a rifle. Thanks to their experience hunting down pesky rabbits, these guys didn't just ride horses. They were expert horsemen who could shoot straight and survive in the toughest conditions. And let me tell you, there were plenty of tough conditions to face in places like Egypt and the Middle East. In 1915, the Australian Light Horse played a key role in the Battle of Romani. It was a hot and dusty day, and the Australian Light Horse was up against some tough opponents, the Ottoman Empire. But you know what? They didn't just hold their ground, they charged ahead. And I mean, these guys rode right into the heart of the Ottoman lines, firing their rifles and swinging their swords. It was a sight to behold. The bravery and skill of these soldiers helped turn the tide of battle and secure a victory for the Allies. But the Australian Light Horse story doesn't end there. After World War I, they continued to serve in conflicts like World War II and Korea. They may not have been around during the Vietnam War, but their legacy lived on in the Special Air Service and the SAS, who were heavily involved in that conflict. Today, the Royal Australian Regiment is the Army's primary light infantry force, carrying on the proud tradition of the Australian Light Horse. So next time you hear the term Australian Light Horse, remember these were no ordinary soldiers. They were some of the bravest and most skilled horsemen to ever take to the battlefield. Thanks for joining me on this special episode. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an adventure. See ya.